Hi, welcome back to another interview with our advisory board. I'm here with Jonathan Norman. Jonathan Norman joined the Aviation Americas conference in 2021 as an airport strategy expert who completed the first airport digital audit using ACDM protocols at Chicago O'Hare. He served as a speaker, writer, and interviewer at several events, including Cabin Connectivity Summit, Indian Airport Infrastructure, African Aviation Summit, Airport Infrastructure Magazine, Reuters, and FlightGlobal.com, as well as at our conference at Aviation Festival Americas. In addition to his extensive academic and research experience, Jonathan is a former global head of airports and airlines at Frost & Sullivan and current head of business development for Aviapros Consulting Canada. Jonathan has delivered in-depth advisory services for global airports and IT companies and was named on 2022 one of the top influencers in aerospace and aviation to follow on his LinkedIn in 2022. Thank you so much for joining us, Jonathan.
Hi, Gaila. How are you doing today?
Really well. As always, thank you so much for your advice and input. I'm really happy to have you here, and let's just jump into it and start talking about airports. So, when did this passion for aviation and airports take off for you?
Well, it took off very young. I can tell you that. Family and friends joke that I was born in an airport. So, in that sense, I think it's been forever. I know since very young what I wanted to do when I grew up, and moved to the U.S. when I was 18. Studied at the University of Colorado. Got my airline pilot license. Got my aviation engineering degree. And I think that from that point on, everything was about aviation for me until today. And I think it's going to continue for several more decades, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's crazy because, especially you being in the industry for so long, especially in the past, several years, we've seen so many changes in the industry. So, what do you think has changed in the airport ecosystem after COVID-19 specifically? Because obviously that impacted the industry as a whole drastically.
Well, yeah, COVID-19 is interesting what did to airports because it really took a toll for airlines. We all know that everything was halted. In the case of airports, it was a little bit different because it allowed the airports to integrate technology like never before. The main reason terminals were empty. So engineers could go on, put the sensors, the cameras, the devices, the infrastructure, try it out, do the beta testing, go to the auditing phase and everything, and they wouldn't be disrupted by operations. So a platform that you would integrate for an airport in 2 or 3 years, it could be easy done in 6 months. So in that sense, it really changed how airport adopted technology. Digital passenger journey being the main thing, biometrics, controls, everything flows much better right now than before COVID. But I think that it established a breakthrough in terms like we did it on a record time, but it works. Now we have data that airports 5 years ago wouldn't imagine that they could have, but they put it into practice and now they see the results. So that I think encourage airports to invest more money in technology, and I think that's what COVID-19 did for airports. It allowed them to realize that changes can be done through technology, and I think that through the next 10 years everything is going to change in the airport environment into what you would call right now smart airports. That would be the word. But I think that the airport infrastructure is going towards that end of automation in every single process.
What do you think the most significant challenges that airports are going to face, specifically in 2023 and beyond right now?
I would say in regards of operations, which is the key thing for airports, I think they're going to turn into automation as much as they can with the new technologies that are evolving and coming, into the airport environment. Call it blockchain technology, smart cameras, digital twins, small aperture satellites, tokenization also, and then technologies that allow also for like passenger flow management. That's a huge issue for airport retail because you can see how the passenger moves inside the terminal and you can track their consumption habits. So make sure that in the future they would go through the spaces that they have more chances of purchasing stuff from the airport, thus increasing the non-aeronautical revenue. So there are many things on those sense. Operations is in that sense. And I think in regards to retail and non-aeronautical rev for air side inside the terminal are from land side are the big things that are going to change for the airport environment.
Mhm.
I just been to Istanbul airport, probably the newest airport in the world, like 3 months ago, and I was impressed on how they manage to merge retail and technology. And I think they took airport retailing to a whole new level. And I think that in this upcoming 2023, until for the at least the next 3 or 4 years, everyone was going to catch up with that type of technology, and airport is going to be more into retail than it was before that. And
Mhm.
but still a lot of work to do in the United States in that sense, because we still have a lot of regulations on how airports should work. But I think that we will going to evolve into a very new business model for airports.
What are the main factors the airport should aim at on the current stage of the industry then? If we're seeing this get shift towards retail, what do you think that airports should aim at?
Well, there's need to be a change in the concession system for airports. I think they should be adapted more into reality of shopping malls, so to
Mhm.
say. The airport should get some revenue on a dynamic basis, not only just renting the space and whatever it does, because it needs to match up what your passenger profile needs to match up with your retail. Sometimes
Mhm.
I see at airports, especially in the US, I see that a lot, that you got top brands operating at airports where the GDP per capita is much lower. So they're not going to sell, but it's just a matter of branding. But the airport said, okay, it's just a concession. We get the rent and that's it. On another model like they use in Europe or Asia, the airport get a slide of the total sales of each concession. And if you adapt your passenger profile to the products that they can buy, the airport really increases the non-aeronautical revenue on retail. And
Mhm.
I think it's gonna move through that type of model. In regards to retail, then you got another thing that is network planning. Airports started working heavy on networking probably, I would say, 10, 12 years ago. And I think they reach a point where they got the same data as the airline, so they're operating basically on the same basis of information. But I see in airports that there's still a lack of strategy. You need to have a balance between tactics and strategy. The data provides you the tactic where you want to do in order to leverage new service or prove more
Mhm.
frequencies or change the equipment. But I think at the same time, airports really need to think on the network planning on a very long term and become part of the airport master plan.
Right.
So it's not only bring any airline that would put money, but it's also about let's bring the flights and the destinations that really make sense to our airport environment and to our city. And in order to comply that, I think that all airports, and I cannot think an example that would exclude this, would need to create a local committee comply that is need to be formed by the local government, the airport, travel agencies, hotels, and any other major player that
Mhm.
is going to be an influence towards that specific destination. So that allows you not only to put new routing or just to expand your network, but also put a rationale in terms of the resources available at the airport and in the city to provide, for example, for leisure travel or business
Yeah.
travelers. So I think that's another thing that is going to take over in the next couple of years. It would be like smart networking or strategic network development.
From your point as an advisory service and a consultant, how can airports utilize your service for their business development?
I think that in terms I would separate in two different lines. One is consulting services, and one is being advisory services. I think they are different things. On the consulting side, I can do specific engineering work, like changing
Mhm.
processes, enhancing operations, integrating new IT. In the advisory services, it's more related to the airport master planning, or as we talked before, the retail or where the airport needs to go in regards to business modeling.
Mhm.
And I think that's where the airport needs professional services the most, because it's very hard, you as a consulting company, to go to an airport and explain them how to run operations. Airports are experts at running operations. They really do not need your help. They can need your assistance more in, okay, how we integrate this new technology, and based in this new technology we obtain data, how this data can allow us to change the process or audit on a more efficient way, or just make extra revenue. That's what you can do in a consulting, but you're never going to teach an airport how to run operations, believe me. That's one thing. On the advisory services part, that's different because it's more business oriented. And when you go to business modeling, the airports, at least in the United States, are not entities that were developed originally to pursue profit.
Right.
So in that sense, the employees and the executives are more focused towards the development of the airport as a service to the community, as an operations mega platform, so to say. But then they have a hard time seeing how new technologies can evolve into new business models, and how to get more revenue from landside, from airside, and from terminal. So I think that's where advisory services come on, or stuff like sustainability, advanced air mobility, how you can make advanced air mobility a reality in your airport, not today, but in 10 years. Because, I mean, advanced air mobility is not something that is going to happen next year or the other. It's something that, in order to come as a real vertical for the airports, we're probably 6-7 years away from that reality. But airports, in order to plan for infrastructure, they need to get advisory services right now in order to see, okay, how that business is going to play and what role we want to have on advanced air mobility. And I think that the last thing is to get a situational awareness on the services, and that's what advisory services does to a board of the airport. It's like, who's our real competition? And when you ask that question, it really depends. I remember, I'll give you a small example. I was doing advisory services for some Caribbean airports, and when you ask the competition, one airport in the Caribbean would tell you that the main rival, so to say, is another island on the Caribbean. And when you go at the passenger profile, really all their leisure travel, or most of it, would come from the United States, but Europe would play a huge part of that. And the islands would have non-stop flights from Europe. So when you analyze the decision-making process of your customer, your competition wasn't the Caribbean. Your competition was South Asia. Because passengers in Europe, the first option that they evaluate is, okay, we go to the Caribbean, or we go to Thailand, Malaysia, Philippines, Vietnam, you name it. That's the first decision. So they have to work the Caribbean airports as a whole to promote that first decision first. And once the passenger pick the Caribbean as an area, then you go into, okay, which island I want to have. And that's where air network development comes in place, and inter-island connectivity comes in place, and the infrastructure that each island has. So for that type of thought, it's very hard to afford to do it without advisory services, because they don't have the personnel or the employees available to do this type of strategy. They are more operations oriented.
What do you think the potential for airport attendees as a reason to attend our conference specifically? What do you think the potential is for them there, and why should they attend our conference?
Well, I think there's one uniqueness in America's Aviation Festival. I saw it last year. I see it in this year even more than last year, and it's the agenda. The agenda that we put together really targets pretty much every topic that an airport could be thinking, okay, what do we need to do in this sense? From operations to retail to landside to airside to automated services. We bring providers from around the globe with the latest technologies. But I think the way the agenda is laid out, that you don't have only the key speakers, but also you got the panel rooms. So it's like, last year, what I felt when I went into the conference is like each airport can pick their own poison, because it's like you go on a specific segment of the day and you have 4 or 5 different panels that touch different things. So you don't have to go through the standard agenda of, okay, now I need to hear something about, I don't know, de-icing operations, and my airport is in Dominican Republic. Really, the icing operation for Dominican Republic doesn't make a lot of sense. So now you have at the same hour, you got de-icing, you got digital passenger journey, you got automated procedures, you got operations. So every airport can customize their own agenda for this specific event. So you have 5 different airports attending the same America's Aviation Festival, and they could play 5 different agendas according to their own needs. That
Yeah.
for me this year is unique in the entire world.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. Obviously, I'm biased since I create the agenda, but with your help, obviously. And so I definitely agree. And I'm excited, Jonathan, to have you back as an advisory board member, and look forward to hearing your input on the stage in May. And we'll see you then.
Yeah, I see you then, Kyla. And I tell you, it's getting some heat because I'm getting target pretty much every day from airports that are going to come. So I think it's going to be the best event 2023. It's going to be the best ever. So I'm anxious about being there and getting with all the crew there.
Absolutely. And definitely right now in this weather, I cannot wait to be in Miami.
Oh yeah, big time, big time.
All right. Talk to you soon. Thank you.
See you, Kyla. Bye bye.
Bye.